Wow, it's slow. Okay, you guys got it?
Yep. Good.
Okay, cool. Hey, hello everyone. Today is October 4th, 2015, and you're looking at episode 11 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me are my friends Megan Arns,
Hello.
Laurel Black,
Hi.
and Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
So with us today is Shaun Tilburg, and Shaun is the principal percussionist of the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra, and he's the former principal of the Hong Kong Philharmonic. And I met Shaun because he was one of the organizers of the Ted Atkatz percussion seminar in Long Beach, California. So, hey Shaun, how's it going?
Hello, everybody. Going well.
Shaun, since it was a concert day, Manny Flores, Shaun, can you walk us through your routine for a concert day?
Sure. It definitely depends on the rep involved. So, for instance, today was not too high pressure for me and more pops oriented and a bunch of just sort of snare drum ramming in people's faces. So I kind of wake up, play some video games, eat some breakfast. I watched the morning football games and then got to the hall with about 20 or 30 minutes so I could get a decent warm-up in and played my gig.
Sounds hard.
Yeah, not so bad. But, you know, last week, for instance, we had some really heavy stuff and premiered, or we were the third orchestra in the States to play this new music piece by Adam Schoenberg, and I had to go through a much more sort of rigorous regimen. Had to cut down the drinking, get some early nights in, and you know, I woke up with enough time to get a nice long warm up and play through all my parts and get to the hall, you know, with plenty of time to be prepared.
Dude, you're cool. I didn't know you were this cool. Listen how cool you are.
No, I was this cool. But go on.
Did you see the shirt? You have to show everybody your shirt, Shaun.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I named this guy Casey. So, he's got his little drum. And
Nice glasses, Casey.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, sweet. They got him. They got him right. Hey, I forgot to tell you guys. I was gonna do this right off the bat as like my little like break the ice thing, but I forgot and shot right into a question. But I just got back from Samobor in Croatia, where I was at the Ivana Bilic Marimba intensive. So I don't know. Has anybody heard of that Marimba seminar?
I've heard of it, but did it used to be called Ivana Bilic Marimba Week? And
actually, no. That is what it's still called. I just
I had a friend that I think was there several years ago, and she said they had T-shirts that just said I, and then it had the BMW logo for IBMW.
Nice.
I think they're now MW. But anyway, you know, it's really it was a really cool thing. I just taught lessons every day, had a clinic and a master class, and it was in a very small place, but we really got a lot done. Classes every day, coachings for ensembles every day. Students mostly from Croatia, a bunch from Italy. There's one from Hungary, some from Slovenia. Antonio and excuse me, not Antonio. Claudio and Francesca Santangelo were there, so Laurel and I know them. That was cool to see old friends. And anyways, it was a really good.
Who is the rest of the faculty?
Let's see. Oh man, now you're gonna embarrass me. Cause it's not on my head. Joby Burgess was there. He's the guy who does that Prokofiev bass drum concerto.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, so that was cool. I got to meet him, and Laurel's teasing me about jet lag. 'Cause I can't remember. Oh my God, it's true. Oh shoot, man, you just it was like really cool. Everyone was really good.
Awesome.
So yeah, I see you, Laurel. And anyway, but I just wanted to say it because I know a lot of young people out there are looking for festivals to go to and things to do, and I know the ones that are in Europe don't always come to mind right away, but definitely look into this one if you're considering percussion festivals. And it is a percussion festival. It is not just a marimba intensive. I know a lot of them say Marimba Week or Marimba Festival, but they end up all being about all percussion anyway. So Ivana Bilic Marimba Week, it was cool.
Cool.
Yeah. Ben, what do you have for us today? You have something marimba-y, I think.
Yeah, well, actually, last weekend I had a concert of my own. I was in a recreation of the John Philip Sousa Band, and I got the lucky role of playing the xylophone soloist, which in the Sousa Band for 4 years was Joe Green. So I figured I would talk about the Green Brothers today. And so I was surprised at the just amazing resources I found on this. There's a Facebook page for the Green Brothers. It's facebook.com/Green Brothers Novelty Band. And they have all sorts of really cool, like, old photos of the Green Brothers growing up, performing, that sort of thing. And then there's also a website, georgehamiltongreen.com, and on that website I found a dissertation by Ryan Lewis, which was over 200 pages long. It was maybe the best percussion dissertation I've ever seen. It had so much information. So thank you so much to Ryan Lewis for that great dissertation. We owe you a lot. So I'm going to steal a lot of what Ryan Lewis wrote and told you about it and tell you about it today. Joe Green and George Hamilton Green both came from a musical family. Their grandfather, also named Joseph Green, was a violinist, violin maker, conductor, and baritone horn soloist. Their father, who was also named George Hamilton Green Sr., was a cornet soloist, arranger, and conductor of the 7th Ward Silver Cornet Band. So, obviously, very musical background in the family. Joseph Peter Green was born in Omaha, Nebraska on February 9th, 1892, and George Hamilton Green was born in Omaha, Nebraska on May 23rd, 1893. They both started their musical training very young, playing piano, and then they later convinced their father to purchase a xylophone, which George Hamilton Green described as a small, awkward-looking instrument of 2 octaves, some of the bars being more narrow than others. It had no resonators and no stand, but it seemed wonderful, the most marvelous thing we had ever seen. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they actually ended up building a replica of it themselves so they could both practice at the same time. So that was pretty neat. Anyway, on August 26, 1906, George Hamilton Green made his public performance debut as a xylophone soloist on Peter Piper at 13 years old, accompanied by his father's band in Hanscom Park in Omaha, Nebraska. And it was apparently he was a very successful player from a very young age. So kind of going forward throughout the years, from 1915 to 1919, Joe Green was the xylophone soloist in the John Philip Sousa Band. Then upon leaving in 1919, he moved to New York to form the Green Brothers Novelty Band with his brothers. He was also under great demand as a timpanist, and he can be heard on RCA Red Seal recordings with the NBC Orchestra under Arturo Toscanini, which I did not know. Yeah. So in March of 1922, they were really garnering quite a bit of attention for their virtuosity. So the two wrote a book called The Green Brothers Advanced Instructor for Xylophone, and there are excerpts, little pictures from that book in this dissertation I referred to earlier. And one of the coolest things to me was there were early pictures of 4-mallet grip in the book, of traditional grip. And by 1922, George Hamilton Green and Joe Green together had made over 2,000 recordings of different tunes. And they were, at that point, 29 and 30 years old. So giving Emil Richards quite a run for his money there with the amount of recordings they had done. In 1924, Leedy published the Green Brothers Beginnings Method for Xylophone. And then in 1925, George Hamilton Green started publishing kind of individual syndicated mail order lessons, which he called George Hamilton Green's New Instruction Course for the Xylophone, which today all 50 of those lessons are in this book that probably all of us have seen many times. So anyway, continuing to go forward throughout history, September 1928, I did not know this, and I thought this was so cool. The Green Brothers, George Hamilton Green and Joe Green, as well as their significantly younger brother, Lou Green, were hired to record the sound effects for Walt Disney's Steamboat Willie, which was like one of the first animated Disney movies with sound ever. So that's like really cool, I think. And they also provided some sound effects for live recordings of a silent film by, back up. They provided sound effects for live showings of a silent film by Alfred Hitchcock called The White Shadows in 1923 in New York. So then, of course, in 1929, the Great Depression hit America, which was a very difficult time for many American families. Not so for Joe Green, who won a $64,000 a year contract for a weekly radio show for General Motors. So very cool there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, even today, if $64,000 a year is a lot of money in 2015, like 75 years ago, that was a whole lot of money.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Shaun, do you know anybody alive today that makes that much money to play the xylophone?
No.
Bob Becker, maybe. About it. But yeah, then in the 1930s, George Hamilton Green also began cartooning, which later in life he actually retired from music, which we'll talk about in a bit, and began as a cartoonist. This is like drawn picture cartoons, not animated film cartoons, which I was slightly confused about for a while. So anyway, then in the 1930s, George Hamilton Green had some pretty notable students. Benny Goodman suggested that Lionel Hampton study with George Hamilton Green to improve his sight reading. So Hampton studied with George Hamilton Green in Green's home while Green's grandchildren watched. And then some other notable students were William Shinstein, Walter Rosenberger, Charlie Owen, who played with the Philadelphia Orchestra and was my teacher's teacher. So that's cool that I get to trace my lineage back to George Hamilton Green. And Ruth Jean Stuber, who premiered the Crescent Marimba Concertino that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Then I also found it interesting the idea of like sponsorships. In 1935, Leedy created the George Hamilton Green signature xylophone with very sleek-looking mother-of-pearl rails, black pearl frames, polished aluminum resonators, and stay-put wheels with brakes, which was, by all accounts that I read, quite a very good instrument. Between 1936 and 1937, he self-published 35 mail-order lessons entitled George Hamilton Green's New Series of Individual Instruction Courses for Xylophone and Marimba, Modern Improvising and Application of Ideas to Melody. Quite a mouthful of a title. Then in 1939, Joe Green died in New York City. And this, from what I read, affected George Hamilton Green very much on a kind of personal and emotional level, and it was basically the end of George Hamilton Green's career as well. And just a few years later, in 1946, George Hamilton Green retired from music, became intensely devoted to his family, and put all of his energy into publishing cartoons, which he would go into New York City and sell off to various magazines. He also took to woodworking and just doing odd repair jobs around the community. George Hamilton Green then died on September 11th, 1970 in Woodstock, New York. Around this time, Bob Becker discovered the music of George Hamilton Green and had a very little amount of contact with him, and George Hamilton Green kind of said, it's okay, let this go, let this music die, we don't need it anymore, that sort of thing. And Bob Becker refused and researched quite a bit and got in touch with George Hamilton Green's friends and family and went to the Library of Congress and found quite a few of his works. And around 1970, Bob Becker and a classmate at Eastman named Tim Furchin presented a recital with some of the Green xylophone arrangements, and they had a backup group with pianist Mike Holmes, bassist Tony Levin, and some drummer named Steve Gadd, who you may have heard of. And then in 1971, Emil Richards sent Bob Becker a cassette of George Hamilton Green performing, which sparked, turned on a light in Bob Becker's head, and that began the kind of nexus revival of this wonderful ragtime xylophone music that George Hamilton Green was known for. And in 1983, George Hamilton Green was inducted into the Percussive Arts Society Hall of Fame. Speaking of PAS, I found a page where you could actually download some old wax recordings of George Hamilton Green performing. So that is the Green Brothers. I was surprised Joe Green is not in the PAS Hall of Fame as well. So maybe it's about time for that to happen. But that's George Hamilton Green.
What year did you say he died?
George Hamilton Green died in 1970.
Okay.
But
So
his
Bob
brother
had
died
had
very
quite a
young.
bit of contact with him.
What's that?
You said his brother Joe died really young, though, right? Or
He
he was like 40 or
he
something.
died in 1939, so yeah, he was in his 40s, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if he ever kind of came around to what Bob was doing.
He didn't. It was actually. It sounded like in his old age he was very kind of. He had been such a well-known soloist and in the spotlight, and when swing came along and kind of wiped ragtime out, he didn't really keep up with the musical trends. So it sounded like he was actually like kind of very depressed about it and didn't keep any instruments in his home. He kept a few pairs of mallets around. He encouraged his children to study music, but it sounded like he officially quit. And it sounded like when Bob Becker was trying to reach out to him, he wanted nothing to do with it. And he literally said, "Let this music die." So
Wow.
I was kind of shocked by that because it's such a celebrated music now, and it's certainly by no means dead with people like Bob Becker and Morris Palter going around and playing this stuff.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It was like it makes me want to know so much more. It's like, wait, why would you want it to die? You know, like,
Yeah.
But check out this dissertation. There's some cool stuff in it. There are letters from Walt Disney about the Green Brothers, and I found two interesting things about his teaching. One thing is he would have his students play Bach two-part inventions with two mallets, like one hand playing each line, which that's pretty hard. And also he was one of the first people to advocate for playing on the edge of the accidental bars, not the center.
Huh.
oh, I thought I was the first. Shoot.
You were not the first.
Damn. I thought I was teaching groundbreaking stuff this last week.
Yeah, so basically anyone at JMU just leave now.
Right. Yeah.
You're just a hack.
Nothing new going on. Hey, let's get Shaun talking a little bit. Shaun, what's your relationship with ragtime and xylophone studies and the Green Book?
Yeah, I've played through the Green Book in its entirety probably 3 times, and every time I'm trying to get myself in shape, let's say I have some really heavy weeks, or I have an audition, which is happening less and less, but if I really need to get my hands where I want them, then I pull my green studies out again and hit them every single day, probably 20 or 30 minutes before I start getting into anything else.
Now, Shaun, I have a question for you in that regard. And for anyone that's not familiar with the way the book works, there's like kind of a technical lesson, and then there's a ragtime lesson that kind of you end up supposedly you're able to like improvise over chords. Shaun, do you mostly go for just the technical studies, or do you like dabble in the improv ragtime type stuff?
Yeah. I never really took to the noodling, as it were. I like it to be written out for me.
Same here, sadly. I think it's really cool, but it's an art form in itself to like really try to dive into.
And when you meet people that are naturally very good at it, it's always very impressive. But I usually use it, the early ones in the book, the first 10 to 15, maybe 20 lessons, the ragtime section is more written out and just helps you with the double stops and the patterns, and I use those a lot. But once he gets into the chord and then take solos, I skip that.
Well, hey, you know what? This kind of is related to a Facebook question from Michael Iorio, and he wants to ask Shaun, can you talk about some different approaches on sticking in relation to desired sound?
I tend to leave people. I'll use my students as scapegoats for this. So I tend to leave them alone if it's working and they're really consistent. Even if it's something I might not do, unless the sticking, let's say you're talking about xylophone or marimba, if the sticking is forcing them to, if it sacrifices the phrasing of the music they're trying to play simply because they don't feel good about reaching this left hand over and they'd rather do some weird, double right, and instead then the line is not continuous, then we change the sticking. But other than obvious, detractions from the music, I'm not nitpicky about my stickings, and I'm very comfortable doing doubles and triples. I don't normally triple on a keyboard, but double strokes. If I'm more consistent, my number one goal is going to be making the phrase feel natural and hitting the right notes.
What's your Porgy and Bess sticking?
I start with like 5 rights, and then it's mostly lefts after that.
Okay.
Right, left, right.
Yeah.
I do it wrong. That's all I know.
Porgy, yeah.
Casey just does it with one hand the whole time.
Probably.
Yeah, cool.
I heard a story about something, and I'm not sure if this is folklore or if this is true, but apparently at Eastman, back in like the late 60s and early 70s, all the guys from Nexus were like showing off their Porgy and Bess stickings and trying to like, you know, kind of outplay each other on this nerdy xylophone excerpt. And Bob Becker walked up and played the whole thing in octaves with both hands, and everyone's jaw just kind of dropped and they walked away. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I've heard.
I believe it.
I've heard that too. Yeah, I don't know if it probably wasn't at tempo, but that would still be very impressive.
Yeah, it would be.
If anyone did it, it was Bob for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt.
I shouldn't have named this Casey. I should have named him Bob.
Bob's better.
One day, Casey.
One day I'll make it.
Yeah, you'll make
One
it.
day I'll have a clown T-shirt.
Cut.
Hey, Megan, do you wanna give us your segment?
Sure, I'd love to. So the newest issue of Rhythm Scene just came out, the October issue, this past Thursday, and one of the interviews in there I did with a group called Ghost Note. Have you guys heard of Ghost Note before?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's a brand new group, which is probably why you haven't heard of them. But you've heard of Snarky Puppy, right?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So Ghost Note is the two of the percussionists from Snarky Puppy, the percussionist Nate Worth and one of the drum set players, Robert Sput Seawright. And this project, well, first of all, Snarky Puppy, if anyone who's listening has not heard of Snarky Puppy, you should definitely check out their stuff. They started in school together at the University of North Texas and playing in the jazz bands together, and they now they're kind of a Brooklyn, New York-based collective of musicians, and in 2014 they won a Grammy for their album, for one of the tracks on their album, which was with the singer Layla Hathaway, and the album was Family Dinner Volume 1. And
which, by the way, that track is insane, and everyone should listen to it right now. Casey, make sure you overlay that on the podcast. We need that.
It's so good. Yeah, it's so good.
We'll get in trouble if we do that.
Yeah.
We'll get flagged.
Will we?
Well, yeah, but they don't really do anything with the flag. Yeah.
Maybe it was like 5 or 10 seconds. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, make sure you get the part where the Layla Hathaway sings like 2 or 3 notes at once. It's insane.
No, okay, you know what? If you ever go listen to a band you like, and on YouTube, and you hear that the track is just slightly slowed down or slightly sped up, I think that's because they're trying to avoid the flag.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just put it on, but reverse it. Just make it backwards. They'll get the picture.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, it's so good. It's so good. And I was actually able to interview Nate and Sput in February issue of Rhythm Scene, and I think it was Nate who described that moment with Layla, because it was like they had like 1 hour to record this track, because each track is a different guest, different musician, and so they had like an hour with her or something, and so that was not planned for that to happen. He basically just gave her a solo, cut everyone else off, kept the organ player going, and that happened. And that won them a Grammy. So check that out for sure. But so anyway, Nate and Sput love playing together, and they decided to record just a concept duo album together. So they thought of some ideas and went into the studio and recorded this album. And what came out of it was they invited Nate's brother Nick to play xylophone, which is kind of an instrument that combines MPC technologies, samplers and synthesizers. Sorry, technologies of MPCs, samplers and synthesizers, and ended up really liking that addition. And I think they had different guests on for different tracks. Each kind of track took on a different life and a different personnel. And they realized that they could actually play this music live. It wasn't necessarily a concept or a studio album anymore. And they planned a tour. So they did 2 tours, and on the second tour they kind of firmed up the band. And that band is now Nate on percussion, Sput on drums and keys, Cleon Edwards on drums, percussion, and keys, Sylvester Oyanyaka on flutes, saxes, keys, drums, and percussion, AJ Brown, bass tones, drums, and percussion, and Nick Worth on xylosynth, percussion, and vocals. So you notice that everyone has percussion in some form. They're all percussionists. So it's basically like a percussion ensemble, but it's also a rhythm section at the same time. So in the interview with Nate for this article, he kind of said that sometimes they'll all be on drums and then they'll go back to this kind of rhythm section thing. And each track has a life of its own, has different influences, as does Snarky Puppy. They have a lot of different influences, and you can listen to different tracks and it can sound like a different band because it's a completely different style. So they're really well versed and have all these different influences. And Nate said some of their main influences are James Brown, the Beastie Boys, Herbie Hancock, and the Headhunters. And so it's a really interesting sound. And they're coming out with an album on October 16th, and it's called Fortified. That's the album that they recorded, but it'll be released on October 16th. And they're playing a PASIC concert, which is the reason this whole issue is PASIC previews. Laurel has an article in there. Woo! But yeah, they were playing a concert on Thursday, November 12th at 8:30 p.m. at PASIC. And I just wanted to read Nate's last quote because I think it kind of sums up what they're trying to do with this band. I said, well, you're going to have a lot of drummers and percussionists to play for at PASIC in a little over a month. And he said, well, it's perfect that we get to play at PASIC because it's the exact environment of the people that we're going for. What we really want is to make a statement that when 2 people play together, the capabilities become so vast. Most of the time, there's only one drummer in a band. You have a bass player, guitar player, all these melody and harmony players, but you only have one percussive element. So we're trying to bring it to the attention of the world that it's better, way better, with a percussionist and a drummer. So with Ghost Note, we want to create something that can be played in a venue or in a club. We don't want it to feel like a clinic, but rather a performance where we make people want to get up and dance and feel the drums as the element that they are. So I thought that was really cool because sometimes we're really trying to get out of this traditional, music. Classical music always has to happen in a concert, and trying to bring music to people in different ways and experience it in different venues. And so I think they're going to really make a statement at PASIC. It's going to be something really different, and they're just such great players that it's.
I just wanted to follow what Megan said with an important teaching moment that I wish I had learned myself younger. I went to University of North Texas at the same time as the Snarky Puppy guys were there.
Really?
They were finishing up as I was getting in, but there was this club called Haley's, and it was it seemed like every week it was Snarky Puppy playing tonight, and they played all around town all the time. And I did not see them one single time, which was the dumbest thing I've ever done, because I always heard the best things about them. And last year, or maybe it was, I guess it was last year, maybe it was over the summer, they came to Boca Raton, where I am now, and I finally got to see them, and it blew my mind. So point is, when you're in college, go to things, because you might not get to experience something like that for quite a few years after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. I think maybe, how about this question? So some guy named Ted Atkatz, he says, Shaun, tell us about the inspiration for the Regimen, and did you expect it to be such an international hit this soon? So this is Shaun's snare drum book, which I got to check out at Ted's seminar.
Oh, look at him! Look at him!
What? What I miss? But anyway, the book is cool, and yeah, Shaun, why don't you tell us a little about it?
Well, the regimen. I just got sick of lesson after lesson where a student would come in, maybe they're playing Delacluse 9, like everyone plays, and they sort of hack their way through it, and they get to the end, and they look dejected, and like they just got out of a fight, and it didn't go so well. And I say, well, have you been practicing it? How do you feel about it? What's the problem? And they always say the same sort of thing, which is, yeah, I feel pretty good about it, but there's like 3 little licks I just can't seem to play, and no matter how many hundreds of times I practice it with a metronome or however I do it, it doesn't get any better. And then we'll look at the lick, and inevitably, it's not that they can't play, it's the problem is they can't play double strokes at a really soft dynamic at the tempo that they need to do. But they're just trying to put the lick together, and they just think if they play it 1,000 times, maybe the 1,001 time, they're going to be able to play the lick. So basically the regimen takes this idea of, and as you get older, like I'm sure all of us here have our own system of warming up or practicing on a snare drum. But I just find around high school and through college, thanks, Casey.
Are you looking at the text feed? Yeah, don't look at that.
Yeah, the text feed is throwing me off. Yeah.
We had a train wreck. We had a couple train wrecks in the Ted Atkatz episode.
There were some incidents.
There were a few epic disasters because of the text feed.
I can see that happen. Yeah, Ted's a wild card. But yeah, so generally with high school through college age, I find a lot of people don't have a clear system of how to actually work on their technique. So maybe they had 1 or 2 exercises they've picked up, or some teacher told them, you should play Pratt solos. So maybe they like ram through a Pratt solo, and then there they are in Delacluse 9. But they haven't worked on their concert rolls. They don't have exercises that actually direct them for rolling off of the left hand, or rolling, starting with an accent, ending with accents, playing double strokes into triple strokes, playing ornaments without accenting unless you intentionally want to accent. Things of that nature. So I realized in my own regimen that I'd developed over the years, I probably use 5 or 6 books, and I just have them in a stack, and I pull them out depending on what I feel like I should be working on. So my book, The Regimen, is intentionally simplified and hopefully nice and clear and concise, and it goes through 6 or 7 disciplines of snare drum playing that I think are important to getting the end result, which is facility and control on the instrument. So now when I walk up to play a Delacluse, I've spent so many hours working on my hands and my facility that I can literally, if I'm in good shape, read Delacluse 9 just hand to hand, however sticking it comes along, and then I feel pretty good about it. You want to have more of a plan than that, but the facility to be able to just read a solo down and go hand to hand and roll however you like, and just fill out what you're trying to play depending on the tempo you want to play it, as opposed to I can't play it that fast, so that determines my tempo, or I'm not very good at single strokes, so I have to double stroke this.
That to me, that reminds me a lot of what brass players do. I had a trumpet friend that was like, "Why are you practicing your recital music 4 months ahead of time?"
Exactly.
But yeah, that's how brass players do it. They build up technical facility, and then if you have that, nothing else is all that difficult.
Yeah, all of your string friends, your wind friends, they're going to play scales and arpeggios and finger pattern exercises for hours and hours. They're not going to play Mahler 5 for hours and hours, but when they get that, they've got the facility to do it. And we just have fallen in a lot of places into this solo to solo to solo, and then we hope that we've worked out the technical challenges based on, well, now I'm playing a harder solo, so I'm forced to get my hands to that level.
Mm-hmm.
So Shaun, I have a question. Was this your first book?
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to do another one, for xylophone or anything?
I've already been asked that, and I don't know because I have a clear regimen. I am very like rhythmically and drum oriented because I grew up in Texas and went through marching and all of that good stuff. And um, for me, for keyboard, I've thought about actually doing one for like accessories because people really don't have a system for developing, control and mastery of like a tambourine. Or cymbals or castanets or something like that. But the more I think about it, I just don't have as clear of an idea for myself. So it might be a good thing to do just to make myself better at it, because I generally just those I'm not as organized about. Xylophone, I pull out my green book, I play my bed, and then I go. But yeah.
We'll just cross off his name and write your name on it.
He doesn't even care about it, remember? So he probably wouldn't even care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So who's making all the money for that book? Everyone owns that thing. So where does it go?
I guess his
Meredith,
estate,
right?
He has children's or children's.
Oh, dude, the publisher, I'm sure. I
I
think
bet the publisher's making most of it.
I think if nobody calls the publisher to say, "Hey, you remember to pay me,"
right.
they just don't pay you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here's another question. Rainer wants to know, Shaun, what's your relationship with, he calls it Mr. Self-Doubt. I think he just means how do you deal with, the voices inside your head or motivation issues, or maybe you don't have those anymore, but if you could put yourself in his shoes and, back when you were maybe a little younger, can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think, I've had a lot of people just, especially students, say things like, well, when we talk about auditions or how hard it is to do music, which it's obviously very hard to do anything that any of us are doing, and getting a performance job is a different kind of difficulty. But sometimes they'll say something like, well, you just don't miss notes and you have good time, so you don't have to worry about it. But it took me many, many years and thousands of hours of like metronome and scales and that sort of thing. So along the same lines, that builds your confidence because you have this basis of work that you've done, and that like when you get under the gun, you're going to have something that you can rely on. So I know that with my rigorous audition preparation, after I've done 8 to 10 weeks the way that I do it, I know in week 8 and 9 when I'm getting up to the gig that it's going to be there. And I know that 95 out of 96, 97 times, which is weird numbers I just picked, I know that I'm going to play it the way that I intend because I've made it automatic and I've spent the time and I've done it the way I want to do it. So for me, it's not so much like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I'm awesome and today is going to be awesome because I'm Casey Cangelosi. It's more like I spent so many hours that I can depend on myself because I know I've done the work. So that gives me the confidence.
So that to me is called real confidence, not like I'm telling myself to be confident. It's just, yeah, you obtain real confidence through like, wow, I did it, and look, I can do it, and thus there's no self-doubt anymore. Is that sort of right?
I like too that it's like clearly you know how to practice for yourself and have great practice things, but I also I love when people start talking and it's very clear that something as simple as the laws of probability have a place in musical practice. We think we practice hours and hours and it's so artistic, but it's also like, no, if you did it 300 times and it was wrong 180 times, it's probably going to be wrong on the gig.
And at the gig, you're going to go up another 40% on that. It's
going to go up even more. Yeah, and it's like simple mathematics in some ways.
Also, one other thing though, and like I don't like to say this because it sounds like, oh, hitting right notes isn't important, which it is, but at the same rate, one thing to consider is that everyone, literally everyone, will make a mistake at some point during their playing. It's just a fact that you have to accept. It's why it makes you human. So yes, of course, practice and hit all the right notes, please do. But at the same rate, when it gets to the time of the performance, you can't be sitting there doubting yourself that you might miss a note, because you probably will at some point. It's just the reality of our game, and there's nothing wrong with missing a note every now and then. Prefer not to, obviously, but you can't, like, self-doubt yourself and just constantly beat yourself up over the probability of maybe missing one note, because the more you doubt yourself in that way, the more notes you'll miss. Except for Casey, who probably doesn't miss any notes.
Doesn't miss any notes.
Man, what did I do wrong, man?
That was a compliment.
I made this podcast. I asked you guys to come on it.
I have to
don't
say
know what I did.
I have to say there are only 2 people I have ever seen give what I think was a note-perfect performance, and it's Casey and Shi-Wu.
Whoa!
Yeah, when did I do that? I believe Woo. I don't know about myself.
When you played a PASIC, it was like perfect.
Oh, ba-bam. Oh, man, yeah, you gotta practice for that. Well, cool. Well,
also, at that performance, I think I was sitting 2 seats away from Laurel, but I hadn't met her yet.
Wow.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. That's fun.
I want to ask Shaun something. How do you think, speaking of auditions and your preparation things, of course you're not that old, but how has the audition scene changed in percussion, like since you started and to where you are now? What's different about it now, and have you seen, I don't know, an evolution?
Yeah. Well, I've still taken a few auditions since I got back from Hong Kong. So the past 3 or 4 years, I've taken another 4 or 5 auditions. And it was interesting coming back after that hiatus of having a job for 4 years and then coming back to it. Honestly, I don't think it's changed a whole lot, except that people are putting harder things on the list. It's getting more and more common for someone to like find a really obscure Messiaen or Ligeti thing and just and I think it's also kind of a good thing to do, because it puts everyone basically on the same page for one specific challenge. Because I've taken 30-something auditions. So when I see Porgy and Bess, obviously that's been on 100% of them. And 98% of the list I would have seen before and learned before many, many times. So people now really like to have something that you've never seen before that's really difficult, that's in the rep, and also more marimbas involved and more solos. So it's kind of becoming a little more European that way. They like to do, a movement of a multi-percussion thing and a contemporary marimba solo. And that's becoming more and more common. And I think I've talked to my friends in the orchestra in Phoenix and when I was in Hong Kong, and the real ugly truth of it is when a percussion audition happens, people don't know what the hell is happening to them. Like these poor clarinets and violinists sitting on the committee, they're just barraged by notes and rhythms, and they've never had to listen to crash cymbals by themselves. Xylophone, they didn't realize how loud a xylophone is. Things like that. It's insane to them. So they look to the percussionists on the committee. They're trying to latch on to something, and normally that will be your Bach, and then now they'll put like a contemporary solo, or they'll put some Mozart on there. That's why Magic Flute gets asked, because it's a reprieve for these non-percussionists who have to listen to what we do, and they don't really understand it.
Huh. Interesting.
What do you think the thing students, like if a student wants to win an audition, what do you think the thing they would come to you for? Like what's the big secret they're looking for when they come to
everyone is looking for secrets. So I feel like I'm getting on a high horse now and like harping on the same thing, but they'll ask me about, well, what's your sticking on that? I'm like, who cares? Or like, I don't know, because it was different the last audition. Or they'll ask me, what mallet. Everyone wants to know what mallets you use, or what type of snare drum, or what snares do you have on there, or what head do you put on your snare. They're like, man, what you need to do is just learn how to play the snare drum, and you need to use a metronome. So it's like, it always comes down to the same things about just being your own biggest critic and putting in the time. It's not like these magical. Of course, there's like traditional ways to play things, but more often than not, they're far away from that if you're more worried about things like what mallets are you using and what gear are you taking.
Right.
Good question, Casey.
Yeah.
So, Shaun, what was your experience like in Hong Kong? What was that orchestra like, and what was your experience living there?
Hong Kong is batshit crazy. I loved it, but it is insane. I had many friends come in from like New York, Chicago. We had people come from Tokyo to sub with the orchestra, and across the board, everyone is shocked at how insane Hong Kong is. And it's just
in what way?
It's the same population of New York City, but in the size of Manhattan. So it's just condensed. It's not like a huge amount, but it's like 10 million now, and there's just no space. And beyond that, it's just more of a cultural thing. There's no such thing as personal space and privacy. So you're just in a fight for your life all hours of the day. So I loved. It's a frantic city. You can do anything you want any hour of the day. There's bar districts. There's prostitution if you're into that. There's all kinds of partying. There's live music everywhere. All of that good stuff. But it wears you out really quickly.
Yeah. Was the orchestra were most people from Hong Kong, or it was mostly foreigners?
There are very few from Hong Kong, but there were about somewhere around 30% from Chinese descent.
Okay.
So some were Hong Kong, many were mainland, especially in the strings. Brass, winds, timpani, and me, we were all British, Australian, American.
Okay.
So it's probably 50-50 almost, 60-40 Western of some kind of.
Yeah.
And I play a lot in Malaysia as well, and actually I'm going there in a couple of weeks. And
oh, cool.
They're probably 70% European, American, and maybe 30% Asian. So
okay.
They're very
I have a question.
global there.
Obviously, it's a Western orchestra. I'm sure playing mostly Western repertoire. Was there any interest in the orchestra, or just in the community in general, and like Chinese traditional music, or some sort of ethnic music, or was it pretty much just Western music?
In Hong Kong, they have multiple orchestras. So there is a Chinese orchestra, which is, by all accounts, is like the best Chinese music orchestra in the world. So they would travel all around China and Asia, and they play on their instruments, which are very loud, and have a great time. And then they also have a second Western orchestra, like classical orchestra, and then there was one in Macau. So there was actually a lot of music happening in Hong Kong. So we were basically all Western, but we had commissions for like mainland Chinese. There's some classical Western composition orchestrators in Asia. They're not just writing for Chinese instruments. So, yeah, we would play those, but yeah.
Was it like
to...
Tan Dun or Bright Shing, like that sort of vein of composers, you mean?
Yeah, we played a few of those. Tan Dun was there a couple of times. We played some of his stuff, and Bright as well. Yeah, both of them. They're the main two.
And did you feel like there was a lot of support for classical music and interest in classical music in Hong Kong?
Yeah, actually, it was kind of a double-edged sort of thing, because the orchestra did have so many Westerners in it, and they're basically good about it, but you got the feeling like they would rather have more Hong Kong players in the Hong Kong Philharmonic. But the fact of the matter is, like how many Hong Kong is a city. It's one city. So how many residents of Chicago got into the Chicago Symphony? It's like zero. So it's a different idea, but it's more of a patriotic thing when you're talking about the Hong Kong Phil. it's like their orchestra. So
it's a very nationalistic thing. Yeah. It was. I played in an orchestra in Jordan for a year, and it was kind of a similar situation. But also, yeah, there just wasn't the training that was needed and consistently for long enough period of time to be able to train people to play in a professional orchestra. So they had to hire some of the spots out to foreigners.
And actually in Hong Kong it's improving a lot, and it's really at a pretty good level. So all of the subs I use, more and more were Hong Kongese, like Cantonese locals, and they were totally competent. Some took lessons with me, and they played musicals when musicals came through. I mean, they have like an actual scene there, and it's great for teaching. I mean, the two, especially if you're Chinese, the two members of my section taught like 30 or 40 lessons a week.
Wow.
Yeah, like to all age groups, and one of our subs taught somewhere around 70 lessons a week. I mean, it was just never ending. Everyone, it's very much an Asian thing, you know, Japanese, Korean, and Chinese, they put their kid into some instrument. And, you know, like flute and violin and piano, they could teach thousands of lessons if they wanted.
Wow.
But for percussion, it was pretty good, too.
That's awesome. How's your Cantonese?
Non-existent.
Did you not?
I was going to learn when I got the job. I was excited, like I'm going to make this big change, and I'm going to meet, you know, Cantonese women and marry someone and like whatever. But I went to learn the language.
Not in the prostitution district, though, somewhere else.
No. I stayed far away from there.
Well, I was going to edit that out. Now I have to leave it in. You referenced it, so now I have to.
I just derailed this entire thing. I ruined it. Sorry, Shaun.
But yeah, I was going to learn, and then I found out only about 10 million people on Earth speak that language. And then Mandarin, you know, is the national language of China, and it's more like 1 billion people. So if I was going to learn anything, it would have been Mandarin. And then when I got to Hong Kong, they violently reject all things mainland Chinese, which, you know, we don't need to get into, but they don't want to have anything to do with it, so then it was going to be useless there as well, so then I just...
So they just speak Cantonese there, or they only use...
They all speak English very well. I mean, they were a British colony for 50 years or something, so...
Got it.
You know, you mentioned a lot of your colleagues teaching a lot of percussion lessons, and that it's an Asian thing to, like, yeah, you put your kid on an instrument. In Taiwan, I learned when I was there, this actually, I happen to be wearing the shirt, but... it's
on your wall too, right?
Nice.
I noticed that earlier.
Yes, yeah. But they, you know, the Jew percussion group guys, they told me that percussion in Taiwan is the second most sought after instrument for the children. Well, it's second only to piano. And of course that's because a lot of the efforts that they've been doing, and you know, the Jew percussion group really like is in the youth like really well, and they're on TV doing youth performances and, you know, playing with, you know, pitch tubes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's of course really good for percussion as a whole. Shaun, you know, one more question. Let's see if we can wrap this one up. Jade Hails wants to know, I think what she's asking is, what's the difference between, you know, like where's your mind when you're playing chamber music versus when you are in the symphony?
Well, that's a complicated one. So to simplify it as best I can, for chamber music, I feel it's more cooperative, more communal, and you're working together. And you all presumably like each other, hopefully, and you're making a product that you are, like, you know, sharing. And then in orchestra, you have sort of combative elements, and everyone's like fighting for their space, and then you have your roles. So brass are sort of leading dynamics, because if they play loud, everyone's got to play loud, and percussion is hopefully holding down the fort time-wise and driving the band forward, and then adding color otherwise. And strings are bringing all of the music and you know, bringing the nice moments. So I find in orchestra I'm much more, I mean, you want to you want to like bring your own musicality and all of that, which is great. But my main job is to make sure that I'm in time and I'm on the front of the beat and I'm holding everything going forward, and that I'm dependable. You know, today I played a lot of John Williams stuff, and more often than not, I've got some very loud snare drum rhythms, and I can derail the entire thing by being lazy or not paying attention or playing too loud or not really hearing that 30 feet away the brass is nearly in unison with me but pulling back a little bit. So I feel like you have different responsibilities, but in chamber, at least when I did it many years ago going through school, I don't get to do it so much now, it was a lot more like looking at each other, breathing together, placing things, and I felt like I had more freedom to be like more musical, honestly. I feel like orchestra, I have to focus on holding my section together, at least as a principal, and providing this basis of time.
Do you still get, you know, like you're playing in the orchestra and you get the nice moment when the hair on your arm stands up and you're like, oh yeah, this is so nice? Or are you very aware of, you know, this is the job I'm doing right now?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think it depends on your passions too. Like I love Mahler, and still, no matter how many times I play, you know, Mahler 5 or 6, every time we play it, there's a few moments where I'm just like, oh, this is fantastic, this is great, and I'm just enjoying it while I'm playing it. But yeah, I'd say mostly I have to be so focused on playing my stuff exactly the way I should and where it should be that I'm not able to enjoy the moment as much as I wish. I'm much more just trying to be exactly aware of what the person waving their hands is doing and what sounds I'm making.
You know, Shaun, every time I hear an orchestra, and I mean, I've been hearing good orchestras for the last many years, so that's probably why. But every time I hear one of y'all, I think, oh man, I should have went for that. I should have done that. I'm doing the wrong thing. I love that music so much because I do. It's like it's so fantastic.
You know what it is you were wasting all that time on those ragtime xylophone lessons.
That's what it was. Yeah, none of that paid off.
Not too late, Casey.
I actually feel the same way when I hear like a really good drummer, you know, or see like a really good drummer. I just have this moment where it's like, oh, I should have just done that. That's so cool. That's so cool. You know, and then
like
you get over
a really
it.
tight band like Snarky Puppy, then you're like, yeah.
Right. Hey, unless you guys have any last things for Shaun, I think it's time to go. Cool?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good.
Shaun, thanks so much for joining us. It was really cool, and yeah, great insights and good thoughts as always. I'm so sorry you won't be in Australia for the next TAPS.
Yeah, I'm having a baby, so that's cool.
Congratulations!
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, but we'll meet up. You're doing it next summer, so I hope.
Summer. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about that. Cool. Hey, well, Megan, Ben, Laurel, thanks so much for joining. You guys are awesome as always, and I can't believe we're past episode 10. It's like, yeah. It's like we've been doing this forever already.
Gotta get Ben's party hat back.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good to have you back, Ben.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, we haven't seen Ben in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Wow.
It's been rough. It's been rough having some nightmares.
Okay, I had a nice momentum going on the rap, but you guys kind of
get some sleep. Casey.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week for episode 12 at Percussion.
Perfect.
I did it for you.
All right. Later.